Sports fans, get ready for Sportz-USA. Get sports from a personal point of view from seasoned professionals who've reported and lived the stories. Now let's go to the crew high atop the Sportz-USA press box. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Sportz-USA.com. I'm John Askins, and today we're going to be joined by Kevin Long in Dallas, Bo Carter in Dallas, Lee Baker in Amarillo, and Tom Russo over in College Station, Texas. And we could have a couple of surprise guests as we go along, but due to technical difficulties, we do have another guest who you won't be able to see, but he's a good friend of ours, Brian Faison, formerly the Athletic Director at Indiana State, at New Mexico State, at North Dakota, and previous to that was assistant AD at the University of Louisville, ran the Cardinal Club, and then most recently has helped a friend up at the University of Maine as an assistant AD. It's very important, I think, Brian. We've got a lot of questions about, all the events that are going on with the NCAA, and we've got some background in that area, but we just thought that we would get someone who's been inside the NCAA meetings to join us and try and sort out what the hell is going on, in college athletics. The Sports Commission, one thing that looks like it's promising coming out of that is this 5 years to play, 5 years, and then you're done no matter how old you are. And I believe it's, isn't it 5 years from your birthday, Brian?
Birthday or graduation date, I think.
Okay.
There's graduation date in there somehow.
Are you getting an idea that might be a concrete item coming out of this commission? And one of the things that was brought up to me is that I think I saw Robert Griffin III said you're going to have to have some exceptions in there for the religious schools, like BYU sending their players out on missions. But in the end, is that really fair? Because you're going to have 25, 26-year-old guys playing against 18-year-old kids.
Yeah, you talked about confusing. And I've just been on the periphery of those guys for the last 3 years. So I don't know how much insight I'm going to give you, but I think this is probably the best step I've seen so far, this 5 and 5. Just one transfer. That seems to me at least logically out of the gates. But, the bottom line is it's all going to be sued. There's going to be the biggest gain in all this is going to be the lawyers and hopefully to some extent the student athletes in the end. But then you got athletes that adjusted their transfer issues prior to all this going down, anticipating one thing, and now they're finding they can't get that fifth year back. So it's there's no clean break, I guess is what I would say, but there's a cleaner break than others, and this may be the cleanest. Specifically with international student athletes, I think this will have an impact, and I'm not sure that isn't intended to some extent, but I can tell you a story about an Israeli place kicker for the Louisville football team back in the day. And that guy was like 35.
Gosh.
And you start making exceptions, and where do you stop? Well, that's what I think got him in a little trouble under the old circumstances as well, because they kept making exceptions. But the religious issue is an important one, and I don't think that one's going to go away. I think there will be an exception made for that. But I think basically what they're saying is no exceptions. You get one transfer, and that's it.
Yeah, you get one transfer, and then if you graduate within that period of time, you can transfer, I guess, and play one graduate year is what I understand it.
Having not seen the paperwork, good question, but I would hope that would close it down. I think, at the end of the day, you can't, they have let it get away from them. I mean, you got athletes on their third or fourth school under this current system. How are they eligible academically? They had to have satisfactory progress towards a degree. There's no way.
Exactly.
Now, maybe now it's just you have to have a 2.0 or a 2.5. That part I don't know. Not clear to me, but I don't see how you're eligible.
You have a guy like Pop Isaacs that has played at Texas Tech, Creighton, A&M, and now he's transferring, I think, to I don't know where
Well, there's many players that are playing like their fourth school within 5 years, and there's no way that I don't want to say it's an impossibility, but there's not much way that they're making their grades when they're just shuffling around, to schools like that.
Let me target on that though, John. They could be eligible in one sense if they have a passing grade point average. Nothing about satisfactory progress towards a degree or anything like that.
Right.
But that's entirely possible. And I suspect that's exactly what's been going on of late.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Do you see anything on the horizon that's going to reel in the NIL or how it's going to be regulated? I think right now, one thing that we've seen, Brian, is every time someone comes up with a lawsuit, the NCAA backs down. And so, supposedly they're talking about a salary cap. And I think that as soon as they come up with a figure, somebody's going to sue it and say, that's discriminating against their career interest or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question about it. I mean, that's a fundamental basic for a whole flurry of lawsuits coming up. And they'll come. Believe me, they'll come. I mean, they're going to, no matter what the NCAA tries to do with that particular situation, you're actually telling somebody they can't make money off their name.
Right.
Well, maybe you can. And you used, the old adage in the NCAA back in the ancient days again, was if you didn't want to be a member and by the rules, then you can go someplace else. Well, that one went out the door. And, now it almost doesn't matter what the NCAA rules are to some extent. In fact, I think for a better part of a year, things kind of ran crazy anyway. And part of this five-year plan at least puts some stabilization to this process. I can tell you at Maine, where I was before I retired for the second time as a deputy AD up there. When all this stuff started coming down, of course, they're getting cherry picked left and right. So they've got a really good football players gone. Well, their quarterback, the year I was there, he was really good. Gone. He was gone. He left. And, it just cripples a program like that because they got to go right back to the square.
Right.
Recruit the recruits.
The mid-major conferences have become the recruiting grounds in essence for the D1.
Yeah, they're kind of the minor leagues in a lot of respects.
Right.
And yet at the same time, you can't blame a young athlete for not wanting to improve their athletic opportunity, certainly their financial opportunity. So that's the hard part about all this is you've opened up the door and you're not going to be able to close that door, I don't believe.
Well, if you just joined us, you're watching Sportz-USA. We've got John Kearns up in Grand Junction, Colorado, Kevin Long and Bo Carter in Dallas, Lee Baker in Amarillo, and Tom Russo in College Station. And I'm John Askins in Houston. And we've got Brian Faison, former athletic director, again at Indiana State, New Mexico State, North Dakota, as well as assistants at Louisville and Maine. Brian, let's talk a little bit about in your career, what a move from New Mexico State out in the desert Southwest to North Dakota. And what a thrill it must have been for you to be a national champion. But one of the things that I hate to even bring up, during your whole administration, you had to deal with that name change issue. Explain that, what was happening while you were there.
Thanks a lot, John.
Yeah, they were the Fighting Sioux, correct?
They were the Fighting Sioux. They've been the Fighting Sioux for probably 60 years. And
didn't the Blackhawks use their logo?
The older logo.
Yes,
they did. Yeah. But so it was fun. So when I got there, the NCAA had come down and put us on their hostile and abusive list of schools.
Nice.
And provided for certain limitations. For example, we couldn't host a regional. We couldn't play in the tournament with our uniforms. We couldn't be referred to as the Fighting Sioux. I mean, uniforms with the logo on them and all that kind of stuff. And so we went through a whole different set of stuff. So the state university decided to fight it. The state pushed them to fight it. And we got a bit of a reprieve where the NCAA said, okay, within 2 years, if you can get namesake approval, better minds prevailed. And we just went ahead and had a contest and got a new logo. And I don't like the logo. I love the old Sioux logo. But anyway, we were able to finally get past that. And they pretty much got past it. However, if you go to a hockey game, when they get to the end of the national anthem and say the home of the Fighting Sioux, And they're everywhere. They get the fans travel great. I mean, that place sells out 11,000 plus for 23 to 27 home dates every year. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's the best collegiate hockey facility, period, bar none. And yes, I'm a proud daddy, but I'm telling you, it's amazing. But
guys, let me just let you go around the horn. Coach K, what questions do you have regarding the NIL and the state of the NCAA right now?
Well, the biggest thing that I've been looking at, John, like the College Sports Commission, which has kind of replaced the NCAA, they're being sued right now at 18 Nebraska football players. They because of the third party involvement in NILs, third party contracts, and which we used to think of as money under the table. The car dealers, the billionaire finance, guys like that. What's the status of that? I mean, the fact that, what's to keep people from making a living? I mean, that's going to be the ground. I mean, the fact you're denying me the right to make a living. We're talking millions of dollars here. Do you know the status of that right now? I mean,
well, they're right. I mean, that's the problem.
That's kind of been the basis
the NIL
from the
was
start.
supposed to be a marketing valuation.
Right.
It was not supposed to pay. You're not supposed to be a pay for pay, which of course it's clearly become. I mean, my goodness, you go back 5 years ago, most of the stuff that was illegal then is legal now.
Yeah, that's right.
We haven't even done a show on the SMU situation.
Yeah, they're just 40 years ahead of their time.
Yeah, but Bo, you talked about that in that 30 for 30 special, and I laugh at that stuff now.
Yeah.
It seems like it would just be no problem.
So
just a little ahead of their time.
How will the NCAA? First of all, I think the NCAA is going to be out of business within a year, don't you, Brian?
Well, I do think they're going to be out of business at some point. Whether it happens actually or not, I don't know. But the other thing is, whatever replaces them, it's the same deal. And the good news is I don't have to worry about this anymore, so I can look.
Yeah, that's right.
The big boys are going to do what the big boys are going to do. Okay, there's too much money. TV has completely inflated and blasted past any reasonable discourse. And now we're in a whole different world. And I don't know how we come back from some things. Again, you talk about the athletes. Well, they're right. They have a right to make a living. But okay, if you're going to do that, are they now a contract player? Are they in a union? What's the trust ramifications of those kinds of situations? How are we negotiating these things? Can they go on strike? And plus, control does even the institution have over some of this stuff?
Yeah,
very little.
Are they really
Very
even
little.
students?
And that's scarier, to be honest. At least in the old days, you had some idea about what was going on. Now you don't, or you may have an idea, but you don't have any idea about the particulars. And I don't want to pick on Texas Tech, but you got a quarterback now with an interesting situation going on between his transfer from Cincinnati to Tech, and you got a softball player that's making an amazing amount of money. Not that she doesn't deserve it, but I hate to be the person that doesn't have an answer. I don't have an answer. I don't know.
What about your stance at New Mexico State on the mid majors? A lot of the mid majors thrive by playing those weeknight games on ESPN. And what was your stance on all that when you were there?
Well, I hated it, particularly in football, because we had to play 2, even 3 money games during the year, and it just it just kills your team. The sad part is the kids are all excited because they get to play at that level, and they got a chip on their shoulder and they want to show stuff. But realistically, through those games, kids are going to get hurt and they're going to be done. And your team's it could be a good team at your level, but although I will say this, one year we opened up at Texas and we actually were ahead 7-0 in the first period, first quarter.
I remember that game.
That didn't last. We got shellacked after that, but the kids. On one hand, the kids like to play the games. For an institution, we need the paycheck, and I hated it. Sometimes the trade-off was fine, but other times I really worried about kids getting hurt and what it would do to the season. I felt bad for the coaches sometimes because sometimes they inherited an unbelievably tough schedule that they really had no chance to be competitive in. So that was hard. But
what was it like getting the call from University of Texas, or did you pursue 2 games like that a year, or did you just have people call you?
Well, no, we had a broker who was with ESPN that was involved in helping us with games towards the end of my time at New Mexico State. But we were terrible. Wouldn't you buy us? Hell yeah, you'd buy us.
Yeah.
We want those guys. And back then, I don't think quality of opponent was a big deal. because the playoffs, there wasn't a playoff system at that time. Now it's a little different. They got to be a little more selective about who they play, but that is the big boys. But yeah, it was a balancing act, and we tried to keep it regional if we possibly could, which is why we ended up playing 2 games in South Carolina and the game in Army makes no sense. That's regional, right? So yeah, it's just our Florida for that matter. Although we almost beat Florida once, but our game anyway. But anyway, it's a hard one, and I always felt bad for the coaches. I mean, they all think they can do it, but the reality is, over time, you just know you can't.
Well, I think one of those games that you scheduled was responsible for the long run for the program. You scheduled Minnesota, and at that time, Jerry Kill was the coach at Minnesota. Well, that got him familiar with what was going on down in Las Cruces, and man, he came down there and did wonders, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And he took all his good players to Vanderbilt.
That's right. Right.
So it was a great deal for New Mexico State. Yeah,
for a couple of years.
It was their first bowl games in 60 years. And if we were playing the bowl system the way it is now, when I was the 80 there, we'd have gone 3 or 4 times. But
yes, yeah. When I was working with Brian, this was 1999. We actually went over and beat Arizona State like 35-7. At Tempe, and that night it could have been 60-7 the way that they played.
I was mad at our coach because we could have run up 50 or 60 on
them. And
it was
that was
ranked. Like 15th in the nation going in the game.
They were ranked, and that year certainly the Aggies deserved a bowl bid, but they didn't have as many bowls as they do now. Now they've got like 100 bowls, But the thing that was great about that year was that was the first time, like in 15 years, that the athletic program was in the black. So It was pretty amazing. Lee, what questions do you have?
I have just a couple of questions. One, and looking at that college commission story I saw, you guys were talking about the age factor. I think the story said that you could graduate when you were 19. That still means that if you play 5 years, you're going to be middle-aged 20-year-old, 24-year-old. Still, I mean, that still seems to me to be an upper age bracket. Doesn't that to you? Or
that's a good catch. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I just think it's so different than what if a guy goes in the military and is in the Army for 3 years, he's 22 and he comes out. Is he affected by that? I mean, is that another one of those situations where it's going to be an exception? Because there's going to be every kind of exception.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. There's going to be every kind of exceptions. We were talking about BYU, but I think the military's right there too, it's just like everything they come up with, Lee, somebody else says, no, we can't do that because of this. And I just don't know that anything is ever going to be worked out because for an agreement to be a good agreement, it has to be good for both parties. And for one reason or another, one of the parties will never agree.
When I was in high school, you were 17 or 18, and I never knew anybody who was 19 who was still in high school at the time. So I guess they're getting stopped back a year while they're in grade school or middle school before they get to high school to get that age group in there.
Well, I think it's almost more of a statement, but I guess I sit back and I think for years and years, this system worked to some degree, but there was always money involved. It was just under the table,
right,
as Lowe's 30 for 30 surely showed. Now it's just out in the open. And I don't know why. I guess what I'm getting at is if you make a rule, if you make a salary cap, you alluded to a salary cap. If you make a salary cap, I think all that's going to do is to encourage other big name programs that have lots and lots of money to do stuff under the table. They've always done it in the past. It was always that dirty little secret. Why wouldn't that continue if we put some salary cap in? Again, we'd go back to the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to haves and have-not, Brian. There are schools that just don't want to be, mixed up with some of the mid-majors or the schools, even like Texas Tech, even though that they're, raising a lot of money now. If they go to this playoff plan, I saw one of the coaches said 24 is the number that they're looking at. Well, that means that they're going to have a large super conference that probably only has, 60 62 teams in it, and there's going to be a lot of teams left out. And that'll bring me over to Bo.
Hey,
Where's that going to leave Mississippi State and South Carolina and Vanderbilt?
Vanderbilt. Hey, they're going to be in that whatever the Southern Conference, whatever's the leftover conference. Brian can do. Brian, well, two things. First, about the big move of Kill and all the New Mexico State players to Vanderbilt. What I'm sure they're not really popular in Las Cruces now. But and the other thing, what in the world is going on with conference realignment? Sort of in conjunction with that other.
Well, I mean, you're already that's part of why it's going the way it is, because people are scrambling to take advantage of an old name that really doesn't exist anymore, like the Pac-12 in reality, and the revenues and the TV market and all those kinds of things that they think are going to help their program be competitive. What's this out there? I mean, you got Stanford in the ACC, you got Washington in the Big Ten. I mean, what geographic sense does that make? None. But on the other hand, we're past worrying about that. That's not the issue. It's how do you have the best market for your program, marketing or markets for your program, and what generates the most revenue. And boy, does it generate revenue. And even at the mid-major level, I think from a TV standpoint, at least right now, there's some pretty good dollars, but nothing like the Big Ten or the SEC or ACC or Big 12, nothing like that.
What about, okay, what we'll do is we'll have you back another day, Brian, but
I'm so sorry about this, guys. This is really
No.
not good.
no, it's not your fault. So let me, let's cover this one subject that you brought up a little bit, and we were going to cover it. Brandon Soresby goes to Indiana, okay, and redshirts a year and plays just a game or so, and then transfers to Cincinnati and plays 2 years. This is a star. And so he's cashing in on that play at Cincinnati by signing $1 million deal, like a $5 or $6 million deal with Texas Tech. Unfortunately, Brandon was betting on the Hoosiers back when he was at Indiana. And, one of the things, I think that there might be an escape for him if he had not bet on Indiana or colleges. But as the way I see it, he's done. There is no hope for getting eligibility back for him, and Texas Tech's just going to have, I don't think they have to eat that money. I'm sure that there's something in his contract.
There's probably a morals clause
or whatever, comparable to the NFL. Well, I mean, don't you view it that way? Don't you view it that way? There's no recourse. He bet on college football, and that's it. You can't really appeal that at all.
If there's a dollar amount issue, like if it was like $1 bet or a $5 bet, does that change things?
No.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't.
No.
I think that's going to be one of the arguments that's in there. In fact, I thought I saw somewhere there was some differential on the amount of money a bet would cost you eligibility. It was like $200 or something like that. And
I agree with John. I think he's done
in the mix of things. So, yeah, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be toast.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, Brian, and we'll sort of continue the discussion, but thanks for joining us, and we'll have you on again soon. Basically, Coach, what's your opinion on Soresby? Don't you think he's done?
Well, I think it is. I mean, the fact, but I also see the hypocrisy of it all, because Tom and I have talked about this several times. You watch any, NFL game, college football game, anything, and you're going to see sport betting, opportunities advertised right and left. They're sponsoring
DraftKings,
they're sponsoring it,
and FanDuel.
And I know when, even way back when, back when I was in college in the 60s, there was betting going on. You know who to go, and like you said, it was nickel and dime stuff. But I don't know. I think he is done. I think he crossed the line. Not just a bet, but hundreds of bets is what they've been able to do.
Is what I read. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the number just keeps, as they look into it. He's into a gambling addiction program now. Trying to help him out, and I hope he gets help. But man, he's done it, and I feel sorry for Tech because they went out and basically the window is closed,
right.
So there's no way to fill that void. But no, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to back down on this one. I don't think he's got very much of a leg to stand on.
Now, what I see for Tech, they're talking about bringing their quarterback that had the ACL injury. Supposedly he's throwing the ball, Will Hammond, already. I think that's just sort of like, cover your bases. But I think that looking at Tech's depth chart, I think the starting quarterback in their first game against Abilene Christian is going to be Kurt Francis. He was the starting quarterback at Tulsa. He ought to be at least decent. So they've got two guys backing up Soresby, Kurt Francis, and then a kid that's been on campus for a year, Lloyd Jones III. He's supposedly an incredible athlete, but I don't think Will Hammond is going to be, capable of coming back that soon. If he gets back, within the third and fourth game of the season range, that's a little bit more reasonable, don't you think, Tom?
I do think that. I think he'll probably be back by about the fourth game. But if you look at the early season schedule for Tech, it's really pretty low caliber teams. So hopefully it will get some experience for those other guys, get Hammond in there by the time that they start playing a little bit tougher competition. I think they went through all last year, made it to the playoffs with a quarterback who basically played with a broken leg all year in Baron Morton.
Yeah.
They're going to have to do that again.
It looks like they're probably going to have to do that again.
Now, bringing up Baron Morton, Baron got drafted.
He did.
He got drafted, what was it, in the seventh round?
Seventh round.
I thought that was great for him, but guess who didn't get drafted?
Diego Pavia.
Yes.
And I think the last I saw, he's going to go to a mini camp with the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know that he signed a deal with them yet.
Nope.
But, man, I feel sorry for the guy in one regards and not sorry in another, because he's so full of himself. But that may be good because he believes in himself and nobody has ever believed in him. And so maybe he can pull a miracle, in the NFL. But we're talking about Soresby and Diego Pavia. One of my favorite Ohio State quarterbacks came to mind immediately, Art Schlichter.
Yes, I knew that was going to come up with the gambling.
And, he's on probation this year, guys, because last year he's 65 now, and he was convicted of possession of federal illegal cocaine. The amount of it was federally illegal. So he's on 2 years of probation. And, he's had nothing but just heartache in his lifetime.
Four decades of it.
Yes, yeah.
Decades.
And I hope
You're right.
that Brandon Soresby is not headed towards that, but it sounds like he has the same type of addictive personality.
Well, John, let me jump in here and tell you something, because I got a little expertise in this right now. I get a call from a good friend of mine, a former head football coach in a P5 conference, and this guy had a great source at Texas Tech. And I will say it's a guy in the staff, but it's not Coach McGuire. I want to make that clear.
Right.
But at any rate, as Coach K said, he's history. They're banking on him being history. And here's what alarms them right now. Soresby came to them asking him for help, and they immediately got him help. But what they're concerned about is we might have another Art Schlichter here, where he actually owes hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And is in debt to gamblers and organized criminal type people. And, he's running for cover real quick. They don't ever expect him to be back there. As this guy said today, they're looking at it as, you get a great quarterback and he blows out his kneecap the first game. Well, next in line. That's what they're going to have to do.
Right.
But they're hoping this doesn't mushroom into a huge deal, where they find out that Soresby owes all kinds of money, and Soresby's gone.
It won't be Texas Tech's fault. I think it'd be they'd be looking for Cincinnati on that one.
I think Cincinnati, and I even wonder what Indiana knew. I really do. I wonder what Indiana
They knew what was going on.
I don't think you're forfeiting some games.
With Art Schlichter, when it came out that he had this incredible gambling problem, that he went through his rookie bonus of $350,000 in less than a year gambling, it came out from people who said they used to see Schlichter all the time down at the horse races.
All right.
If you saw him once a month, down there, that might be one thing, just relaxation, whatever. But they'd see him 3 and 4 times a week down there, and they knew something was rotten in Denmark. So, hopefully this doesn't dig too much deeper, but I'm afraid it's gonna.
Well,
I
and
think
John,
you're right.
you alluded to this when off camera, but I think Cincinnati kind of played dirty with this. I think they kind of knew what was going on and let Tech, when Tech took him at $5 million, they were angry because Soresby didn't sign for their $1 million that they offered him, and now they're throwing this dirt out there before the season. I think that just shows their culpability as well, though.
Well, it could be, but the bottom line, we're looking at a potential mess here, an incredible mess, and we'll see, as more comes out about this. But I don't think it's going to stop right now with Soresby just entering, program for gambling addicts. I think you're going to find out that he owes a ton of money to a bunch of people, and he's running for cover real quick here before the something serious happens. Because let's face it, the mob doesn't mess around.
Oh.
If you owe them money, you're in big trouble, and he may be that. Now, we're hoping and praying it's nothing of that sort, but why would he go ahead and ask the Tech coaches to help him out because he's got a problem? I mean,
Bone, does any other player come to mind during your stay in the Southwest Conference? And
I can't. Even David Sandley, the SMU guy, who's really
yeah.
open the can of worms. But they never say this, but Dallas media outlet, after Stanley's parents had been shopping the store, he was going to go ahead and blow the whistle on them regardless. And the WFA TV came up with the dollar with the money envelopes. His family was going bankrupt from a ski lodge they owned in Colorado, so they finally secured $25,000 from a unnamed DFW media outlet, and he quickly spilled the beans all over the place.
Has that ever happened at OU or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff happened, but I think it's always like we've been saying, it's been kept under the rug. Kevin said it. I mean, it's been happening, and people know, and they just don't speak about it out publicly. And like I said, when I was there long time ago, we knew there was money being handled to people. Like I said, you didn't see all those nice brand new shiny cars sitting in the parking lot for nothing. And and we knew who owned them. And the fact is, we knew where they came from, and there was no way in heaven or earth that they could afford it other than somebody, great grandfather or somebody gave them a car. So no, it happens. And I'm sure every school's got their skeletons that they want to keep buried deep. And so, no, it's been going on forever.
Well,
my
John,
favorite story there, Coach.
Yeah, you mentioned the word
Kansas got into a lot of trouble over that guy who went to Duke, and I can't remember. He's playing for New Orleans now. Who am I thinking of, guys? The guy who went to Duke, and he was supposed to go to Kansas. Well, long story short, though, he was driving around in like a $200,000 car, and he tried to say that it was his grandmother's used car, and she sold it to him. And she must have been one cool granny to be driving around in something like that.
Yeah. Well, John, you mentioned earlier about the hypocrisy of all of it. And to me, I'm not condoning any of the behavior. Don't misunderstand me. But I think there's gambling happening at every football team and every basketball team across the country to some degree.
No doubt.
Maybe like Coach K said, maybe it's nickel and dime and, now it's $5 or $10 here or whatever. But I think there's gambling happening across the board. And NCAA may be opening up a can they don't want to open up right now.
I think all the people at the NCAA need to head up to Comiskey Park on August 11th and get one of those Pope hats that they're going to be handing out. The White Sox are going to be handing out because they need divine intervention on this one. And I really don't see how it ends. I don't know that I'm young enough anymore to see it end unless it's nuclear or something.
Listen, John, when they go to try to do anything to end it, it's going to be immediately a lawsuit.
Right.
If they put, limitations on how much NIL money you can give or anything like that, somebody's going to be in court right away claiming that their, rights are being violated, and they'll win. The NCAA never wins in court.
No.
So
they back off real quickly.
So, John, I'm with you in that I don't see it ever ending either.
Why don't we just go ahead and go to Scattershooting, and then we'll get Brian again with us down the line. Oh, why don't you start on Scattershooting? What's your Scattershooting thought this week?
We haven't touched on college baseball, so we're actually the NAI and D2, D3 teams are all starting their conference tournaments this week. The coach is probably Colorado Mesa up there is number one in the country in Division II. Where coaches Grand Junction, and a lot of things going on. Unfortunately, UCLA had its 27-game winning streak ended the day before Jackie Robinson by UC Santa Barbara after Jackie Robinson's granddaughter had bought him special Brooklyn Dodgers commemorative uniforms. So I guess the best laid plans, but UCLA still dominating Division I, and there are really some great matchups going on. They're talking about the SEC having as many as 12 NCAA bids, the Big 12, and the ACC getting 7 or 8 apiece. So it's really it's getting down close to tournament time here.
Coach, how close are we to the JUCO World Series?
We're about 4 weeks away. I mean,
Okay.
they haven't really started announcing the teams that are going to be eligible. But, Mesa is just having a phenomenal year right now. Bo said it about the baseball being ranked number one. Unknown sport. Women's rugby, they just won a national championship in that. They won the women's national championship in basketball this year. So we're kind of hidden out here in the hinterland, but we've got some pretty good athletes coming here, and they're doing a good job. I mean, and they put on a good show. It's good quality athletics. It's not, and when you go watch a game, you get your entertainment. So I'm proud of what they're doing.
Is that your Scattershooting?
No, I mean, my
Go ahead.
scattershooting would probably be, I cannot for the life of me figure out what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing with Aaron Rodgers. Putting him on, the first refusal, using that on him, and he hadn't even decided that he wants to play.
Right.
It just, it kind of like makes you scratch your head a little bit. Like, what are they thinking?
Did you see enough out of him last year that would make you want him to come back?
He was injured about 40% of the season.
Yeah.
And, he had the lower leg injuries, which as you get older athletes, you've taken so many blows to your body, and usually the lower leg is one of the areas, I don't see it. I just don't see it. I mean, he is going to be a top 10 quarterback of all time. Okay. No, I'm not. When he was in his prime, he was phenomenal. He was the show. But, I agree with you. Last year, he was so beat up and he lost his mobility. Yeah, he's a good decision maker. And he knows the game. He reads the defenses. But he's lost a little bit of the zip. He's lost some of the skill. I don't think, you're going to get your dollar value out of it by just keep beating a dead horse.
Right.
So that's, I just don't, when I saw that today in the flash, it was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought they were just going to cut and go their own ways anyway.
Right.
But who knows?
Kevin, what's your Scattershooting moment?
It's going to be, this is a little corny, John, but Brian had to cut out on us. There was one thing I wanted to ask him because he's got an incredible background. He's been an athletic director all over the place at large and small schools. And, I always heard that the way it works when you're hiring a prominent coach at any school, whether it's Sul Ross or whether it's the University of Alabama, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Tarleton State, there's usually a guy or a group of guys who've got the financial and political clout to control the place and pretty much make the decision. For example, let's take a hypothetical example here, and I'll use Oklahoma State and Boone Pickens because Boone, may God rest his soul, is no longer with us, so I can't slander him. But, I always heard the way to work at a place like that. They'll announce they're forming a blue ribbon committee of administrators, faculty members, prominent businessmen to vet all the candidates, and they'll go over them, and then they'll make their recommendation to the athletic director who will present it to the president. I heard the way that'll work, actually, they'll do all their vetting and whatnot, and they'll give their recommendation to the athletic director. Then the athletic director will simply call Boone and say, who do you want to hire? And whoever Boone wants to hire, that's who they go with.
Yeah, right.
And I was really want to ask Brian, is that kind of the way it works at most colleges?
I agree, Kevin, because, living there for most of my life, Mike Gundy, good example, as long as he stayed in Boone Pickens' good graces, he was going to stay. No matter what the regents, no matter what the president of the university, as long as he and Boone were on good speaking terms, had each other's phone numbers, he was going to stay. And when Boone left us, he lost his safety, the guy that was covering his back.
The guy was giving them the money.
Yeah.
Right.
So I agree with 100%. That's a good question. Is that the way it's done everywhere? I'm sure there's a sugar daddy that's kind of controlling most of it somewhere.
Well, from being at New Mexico State with Brian, I can tell you it's that way everywhere, except the sugar daddy is got a lot less sugar at all the different rings. The sugar daddy at Boise State's got a lot of money, but he doesn't have what Alabama's got. So, Tom, what's your scatter shooting this week?
I think I'll go with something we just barely touched on, was the NFL draft. I was really pleased, obviously, with Texas Tech's draft picks. I was also very pleased with Texas A&M's draft picks. And staying in the state of Texas, the Longhorns, I believe, had 6 players taken. So you're talking a lot of players from the major universities in Texas that were taken in the NFL draft. I think this bodes well for the future of all of those programs, notwithstanding the Brandon Soresby situation. So I was pretty excited to see that. It was good news for Tech. I know they needed a little good news with all this other stuff happening. So, and like you mentioned, Baron Morton getting drafted, he's a tough kid. He took a lot of flack for how bad he played in that Oregon game and that playoff game. And I understand that. I was disappointed. I wanted Tech to put up more of a fight, but goodness gracious, what a warrior. I mean, the guy played, like I said, literally with a broken leg almost all year long, had no mobility. That's why he got sacked so much. So
That's right.
That's where I'm okay with.
All right, my scatter shooting has nothing to do with anything that's been said today. In the London Marathon, I don't know if you read about this, but just like the sound barrier, they never thought they would break the sound barrier. They never thought they would break the 4-minute mile, and they never thought that they would break the 2-hour marathon. But last week in the London Marathon, they not only had one runner break it, the second place runner also broke it, and the third place runner barely was above 2 hours, but he still broke the world record. So they had 3 marathon runners led by Sebastian Sawe, who ran through the 2-hour barrier at 1 hour, 59 minutes and 30 seconds, and he was followed closely by Ethiopia's Yomith Kajacha, Mr. Kajacha, at 1 hour, 59 minutes and 41 seconds. And the guy who was, finished third in the race, and he was 7 seconds better than the old record that was set in Chicago back in 2023. So they had 3 runners that broke the world record. Now, shifting to humanoids. And this is what's coming, guys. In Beijing, they ran a half marathon, which is 13 miles. And the first, second, and third place winner were robots.
Mm-hmm.
The first place robot surpassed the human record that was set by the third place winner in the London Marathon. So he ran 13 miles in 50 minutes, 26 seconds, surpassing the record by the third place marathon runner in London. And all I got to say is it gives me chills to think of American soldiers in the future having these things coming at them on the field of battle. And that is a chilling thought, not only for the military, but for the citizens of every country, because that's where it's headed, guys. The greatest inventions seem to be a product of the military. And there you go. they've already invented humanoids that can outrun humans.
That's crazy. And it goes along with driverless cars, right?
And if you combine AI with this, it's a really scary time for humans on this planet. In a very short time, we may not only be out-thought by the AI brains, but we may be out physical by these robots. And so on that happy note, I'll wrap today's show up. Thanks for everybody joining us for this edition of Sportz-USA.com, and we'll be right back here next week.
Bye,
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Sportz USA, available at our website at sportz-USA.com. And remember to click and favorite so you can join us next time on Sportz-USA.com.